Welcome back to Prep Life. I'm actually in San Diego right now on the road, and I made a commitment to you guys. I was going to do Prep Life a couple times a week, and that's what we're doing. We're maintaining that promise to you guys. So I'm out of studio. I'm in a hotel room outside of Jocko's facility. Jocko's podcast was awesome. It's coming out May 17th, guys. You guys can catch it on Jocko's podcast. 4.5 hours we did. 4.5 hours. Look, I wanted to get on and talk about this situation that's happening with this Title 42 and Title 8. And the reason I have my phone as a reference, because this stuff is confusing. Right now, it's coming to a head because by the time you hear this, we are now in Title 8 immigration law. So yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security head talked about those challenges that we face as a country, with unprecedented numbers overflowing every single immigration facility in this country, mostly across the border of Texas. But it's actually causing issues here in San Diego. There's a lot of these issues that are happening with immigration, but this Title 42 transition into Title 8 is important to understand as a country, especially when it relates to living your prepared life, because it has everything to do with security, especially national security. So let me explain to you exactly what Title 42 was and what Title 8 is. So Title 42 was an era of COVID-19 restrictions on immigration. It was a Trump-era border restriction, and the Biden administration will revert to processing all migrants as was done before the pandemic. This happened in 2020. So right now, Title 42 is not traditional immigration law. It has a major implication for immigrants at the border and has been used more than 2.8 million times to expel migrants. Because the whole idea with Title 42, and the reason it was controversy, or there was controversy surrounding it, is because the Trump administration invoked it as a COVID-19 precaution. I mean, obviously, March 2020, in this time frame, we did not want people pouring into this country, potentially with COVID-19, and not being, essentially it has to do with the capacity also, with our ability to deal with people. But we didn't want a lot of those migrants coming across the border and then bringing COVID-19 into the country. So given the fast-track nature of the expulsions, which often took place in a matter of hours or less, immigrant advocates say its use has been a legal violation of the rights of migrants to seek asylum on U.S. soil. So the sunset of Title 42 is long overdue, and it ends a shameful period in our country, says Jill Marie Busey, Director for Public Policy at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. We unequivocally affirm the legal right of individuals to seek protection. Now, that criticism isn't fair because the whole idea was protecting Americans from COVID-19. Now, the end of this marks a transition into Title 8, which includes decades-old immigration legislation, outlines processes for handling migrants at the border. And while this section of the U.S. Code dictates expedited deportation protocols, it typically allows more time for migrants to lodge asylum claims than what they were afforded under Title 42. So the Biden administration has been working to speed up Title 8 processes by surging hundreds of asylum officers to the border in an effort to more quickly adjudicate humanitarian claims while applying the consequences Title 42 does not carry. Now, here's the overwhelming issue. Each day for the last 3 days, not today included, 10,000 migrants sought asylum on the border. One, most of these facilities can only manage about 10 to 20,000, and we've far exceeded that. There are people, including children, who are sleeping outside, exposed to the elements. Texas just had this big windstorm, and they're out in the elements suffering. And it's a big issue. So what is the Biden administration's solution here? It is literally pushing thousands of migrants into the country with a court date. Now, here's the problem. They originally were going to push all of these migrants into the country without a court date. Let me read you what just took place. As I record this, it just took place, but it happened yesterday or last night. A federal judge blocks Biden administration from releasing migrants without court dates because the Biden administration was going to say, hey, to purge this system, to get it to somewhere where we can manage it, we're going to push thousands of, and as the Biden administration claims, vetted migrants into the country to allow us to deal and manage this huge backlog. That is a huge problem. You're talking about national security ramifications. Brownsville, Texas, as far as I know, an illegal immigrant. I haven't confirmed that, but it literally they reported potentially that he was a legal immigrant, kills 8 Venezuelan migrants, and is charged with manslaughter. Another person in, I believe, Cleveland, Ohio, shoots and kills an entire family of 5 because they were complaining at him to stop shooting in his yard because he was making too much noise, and he murders them. He was illegally here and also arrested multiple times. When you look at this federal judge, on Thursday evening, blocked the Biden administration from implementing a policy that allows for the release of migrants without court dates. So the policy, according to DHS, who is doing everything in the name of protecting the homeland, is saying we're going to release migrants without a court date to allow the system to balance out because it's got too much pressure from all the people because of bad policy. So just hours away from the end of Title 42, Judge Kent Wetherell II imposed a 2-week restraining order on the Biden administration policy, which would see migrants released on parole with conditions. The policy was outlined in a Border Patrol memo this week, which says that migrants can be allowed into the country on parole. No court date, but parole. A process typically reserved for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. If Customs and Border Protection faces overcrowding, the memo calls to practice parole and conditions as migrants are required to make an appointment with Immigration and Customs Enforcement or request a notice to appear by mail. They're saying this process could take years. So there's no due process whatsoever. It's come into the country. We don't know who you are. Come into the country and do your thing, and we'll get with you. What? That is insane. That is lunacy. The DHS head today, or this is yesterday for you guys, was asked by the press basic questions that he couldn't answer. Like, how much is this costing the taxpayer? How much are we spending? Portland, Maine, a small town in Maine, is paying $26 million to house their migration of immigrants and what they're dealing with. Because all these people who get bussed in, they go to specific regions where they have basically, I wouldn't say it's contractual, it's understanding with these particular states, including Denver, Colorado, New York City, the list goes on, and they receive them. But who's bearing the brunt of that? For education, healthcare, food, shelter, transportation, all the thing, you are. He was asked simply, how much does it cost? And he said, I'm not going to answer that. You have the answer. It's basically, we spend a lot of money, but I'm not going to answer that. It's not important to me. So both national security ramifications and obviously a strain or on an already strained society in a recession. That's a huge problem. So one of the issues that comes from this whole deal is the fact that now there's stricter requirements to get in. And if you just come in and you're illegally coming in, you will be deported immediately back and banned from the country for 5 to 10 years. So there's a reason why everybody needed to get to the border checkpoints by midnight. That was released in a public statement, guys. So we're seeing an influx. It's like, it's a public release of information to basically all the migrants. And who doesn't care are the people who are smuggling people, swindling these poor people into thinking that if they pay, they're going to get them across the border. And now there's no like smuggling, they're just walking across. The National Guard, 1,500 troops, has been deployed. Texas has taken a different approach. They're actually setting up barriers and obstacles while the federal government is allowing these people to get in. There's already lawsuits going on right now between the federal government and the state of Texas. All of this is a mess. What does it mean? Well, it just continues to demonstrate to the American people how bad Biden and his administration and all the leadership that he has in charge is running the country. They're not even running the country. They don't even have basic answers. They had all the time in the world, over 2 years, to plan and prepare for this moment, and they haven't. And you know who's dealing with it? The Border Patrol. That's already taxed, already strained, and all of the cities that are on the border and more. If you're in Denver, Colorado, if you're in New York City, if you're in Portland, Maine, and so on and so forth, Salt Lake City, the list goes on, you're going to be seeing busfuls of people come into this country, and they're going to be living on the streets. They have taken parks in New York City and converted them into shelters. Like, what is happening? Now, I'm from a family of immigrants. My mom met my father when he was stationed in the Army in Korea in 1979. I was born, and then we moved to America. And I'm appreciative of that. But my grandma, who had 7 children, all of which are now in the country legally, went through the process. My grandmother, who barely speaks English, by the way, is an American citizen because she busted her ass to become one, the legal and right way. And we're giving open borders with no policy, with bad policy, and not doing the job for the American people first. I get that. I see these people. I see their children. I see them carrying their kids on their back as they cross the water, and I feel empathy for them. But I also understand that, like, this country is dealing with a lot of problems internal because we are externalizing and taking care of everybody else in the world except our own. It's one of the reasons we're dealing with a mental health dilemma in this country. Oh, and by the way, most of the smugglers that are coming from Mexico into this country from other countries in South America are bringing the fentanyl. I mean, the fentanyl that's imported from China doesn't just come through a Chinese supply chain. It comes through the southern border and is smuggled in this country and kills 100 men a day. 100. 100,000 plus people will die from fentanyl and drug overdose in this country. Mostly, I think the statistic is overwhelmingly 90% of the fentanyl that's coming in this country is coming from the southern border and killing Americans. What are we doing about it? Absolutely nothing, as we could see, as demonstrated by this debacle. Another thing I want to talk about real quick before I let you go is this situation with the guy who winded up putting a chokehold on this guy, Jordan Neely. Now, what's terrible is how we call Jordan Neely a Michael Jackson impersonator. Like, white guy Marine kills and murders a Michael Jackson impersonator. This guy was charged 40 plus times, or arrested 40 plus times, from everything from assault, like punching old people, everything, like every charge you could imagine, he was dealing with that. Prior to him being choked to death, he was violently threatening and posturing on people, even pushing people onto the subway tracks. But that's not reported, that's not talked about, because he was just a Michael Jackson impersonator. No, he was a man suffering from mental illness. And who's responsible? The city of New York is responsible. The city of New York City is responsible because they're not doing anything for these people. So the mayor can run his mouth and he can say all these things, but they literally have this as a systemic problem. It's happening all over San Francisco, San Jose, Los Angeles, New York City, Baltimore, Maryland. It is a systemic issue. I saw a story the other day talking about how many people in like 1960 were in mental institutions. It was like 500,000. It was a large, I think our population at that time was 60 million, and it was 500,000. That is a large percentage of the population. Now, if you look at the ratio, there's not nearly as much in custody that are being taken care of in an institution. You know why? Because they're all living on the streets. They're overdosing because of drugs. They don't want to go back to society, so it's not a homelessness problem. It's a mental health epidemic. And what happens? This Marine thinks he's doing the right thing and restraining Oh, by the way, did they mention that a black guy was also restraining this guy? Because these were responsible citizens doing the right thing. Now, the problem is this guy didn't recognize that he was putting a chokehold and it wasn't working. And he held it for too long, and they ruled that this was a homicide, that he died because he was choked to death. Now, the DA just charged him with manslaughter. Daniel Penny is expected to turn himself in as soon as Friday to face criminal charges in connection with the chokehold death of Jordan Neely. We can confirm that Daniel Penny will be arrested on a charge of manslaughter in the second degree. We cannot provide any additional information. Neely died following a chokehold on May 1st. This is the problem with our country now. We have this thing that we teach at Fieldcraft Survival, my company, where we talk about being a responsible citizen. We train every Wednesday and give free classes to the public. We'll be doing that in Utah, hopefully at Firebase Phoenix, Firebase Parker, all the places that we're going to build and evolve. We want to teach citizens to be responsible and to take care of one another. How can you take care of one another being a responsible citizen when you can't be responsible without all of the liability of potentially losing everything because you're trying to do the right thing and then you get charged with manslaughter? This was obviously not murder. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that they went with a manslaughter, a lesser charge, but it's tragic because this and all the situations like it make normal American citizens unwilling to help each other. And that Good Samaritan law, fire and forget it. Because Good Samaritans don't exist anymore, because if you do the right thing, like this soldier in Texas who was defending his life against a protester in a violent protest, by the way, with an AK-47, he defended his life. That's not good enough, because according to the DA and according to the jurors that he down selected, he's a murderer. And he just went to jail for 20 plus years in prison. I think it was 25 years was the charge. That's unfortunate. Guys, I got a lot going on. I'm headed to Andy Stump's place. I'll be doing a preparedness seminar actually tonight. If you're coming to Kalispell, Montana, I'll be there at Black Rifle Coffee in Kalispell. Also doing a personal security class. I just posted a couple new courses that I want to mention to you because it's the first time that I've ever posted it. August 22nd. For the first time, I'm teaching CQHD, Close Quarters Home Defense. It's about home defense, utilizing surreptitious tactics and maneuvering around your home. This is not a raid. This is not Ranger Regiment hitting an objective. This is surreptitious movement inside of your own home with different considerations. Like what happens when you're moving to a crisis site. Like you hear somebody in your kid's room and you're moving down the hallway to them. What happens if you arrive at your house and your front door's open? How do you clear it? What happens you wake up in the middle of the night and you hear noise in your garage? All three of those scenarios are different considerations, and we're doing this Sims base at our new facility in Provo, Utah. Yeah, we're going to have a CQHD shoot house, basically a plywood house that allows you to navigate different problem sets and obstacles. First course that we're offering in that, August 22nd. It's on fieldcraftsurvival.com. Also, just posted a new course, June 24th. I'll be teaching personal security in Heber City, Utah, women's only. So if you're interested in that, go to fieldcraftsurvival.com. Guys, I'm excited because very soon we're going to have our new app up and prepared. My book, A Manual for Worst Case Scenarios, launches on D-Day, June 6th. I'm excited about it. I hope you are as well. If you've already bought the book, pre-order, it's available in the link down below. I appreciate you. I've been working really hard on this book, and I want to provide you guys with a manual for reference. And I hope you like it. I went through this 4-hour podcast with Jocko. We break down a lot of the book. Look forward to you guys listening to that podcast because it'll be available next week, May 17th. And I want to say thank you to my Patreon members, everybody who's believed in us as a channel. This is mainly ad-free. We have to do advertisement in certain segments of my business, but we've worked really hard to provide you value in this and making it ad-free. Last, we are doing the audible version of this. We don't consider it a podcast because I am not going to hinder the YouTube and video audience in like using my hands and talking through different things in preparedness, but I will offer you the audible or audio version where you find normal podcasts. It is not a podcast, it's just the audio version of this show that will be available to you as well, likely in the link down below. I just want to say I appreciate all the things that you guys can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Mike Glover. I hope you guys have a good weekend. I'll see you next week where we'll bring more prep life for you guys. Until next time, peace.